Hello and welcome to another Supercoach Hub preseason podcast. I'm here today with Supercoach Croft. How are you going?
Yeah, good, Scoop. Very well, thank you. Looking forward to this chat. It's a little bit more interesting than our last one, I think, for hookers, so it should be good.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. There's a few different options to go at the 5'8" position. It's one of those spine positions where I've seen a bit of flexibility. Some are just locked up, especially like halfback. There's really only a handful of options we're considering. 5'8", you can go a few different ways. So I guess we'll start off with that. How much value do you place on this position in Supercoach to start the year? Do you try and load up in it as one of the key components, or do you look to have a bit more balance and go heavier in other positions?
Yeah, that's a question I think a lot of coaches will be weighing up for this season. I think we touched on the Hooker podcast as well. Last season, when Nico Hines got injured in preseason, it freed up so much money that it allowed us to prop up some other positions. So we didn't really see the weaknesses in too many spots at the moment until we get through preseason trials. And a lot of things, Vegas can happen. A lot of things can happen. So until we get through that, it's hard to know if the salary cap that we have and is all we have with all the guns that are currently available stay available, then it's a bit harder to spread that money around. It's being spread a little bit more thin than potentially last year was spread around. So looking for value, you're going to have to, all of us coaches have to find value somewhere. We can't have guns in every position, hooker down to fullback. We just can't. So as much as everyone wants to talk about, I've got a gun in the 5'8", and I've got a gun in hooker, and you need to have a gun in front row forward. You just can't have them everywhere. Every team has to make sacrifices somewhere. So this is a position we're going to talk about tonight where I think a lot of coaches might choose here to save a bit of money. Some will save a lot, some might save a little.
Yeah, it's very interesting. There's definitely probably 3 or 4 guys who fit that bracket, but we'll start up the top with one of those guys who everybody's minds at the moment. Do you start up with the most expensive guy in Dylan Brown? He's got a lovely early draw. You've got Sean Lane returning and a lot less injuries and hopefully some consistency in that Parramatta team. Is he just the guy you plug in at 5'8" number 1?
Yeah, that's the question I think 99% of super coaches are going to be asking themselves. Dylan Brown is the hot ticket. He's the gun that we all want. He's the gun that we all either aspire to or we're just going to start off with because we know potentially he's most likely going to be top or top 2, 5'8" in that position, most likely. So he's kind of the one that we need to decide. Do we pull the trigger early based on draw or do we not spend that money there because we do have to save that money somewhere in the team? So Dylan Brown, let's have a little look at him. He's first for first 5 matches actually this season, he'll play Bulldogs, Penrith, Manly, Tigers, and Canberra. So pretty good start to the season there. Penrith obviously a tough match, but Bulldogs, Manly, Tigers, and Canberra, yeah, he could absolutely get off to a flyer. And speaking of a flyer, he's priced at a 76 average for this last season, and the season before that he was a 74 average. So he's actually really consistent. He's not someone that just had a standout season last year. He's actually a consistent super coach. So you know what you get with him, and you know you get the occasional big score with him as well. And due to his indiscretions last year, and it's come out in the media as well, how he wants to make up for that and make it up to the team. So, you know, there's that extra motivation there that makes it hard to turn your back on him and go, do I go double cheapy in the 5'8" position or gun cheapy? It's hard because if he has got that extra motivation, then potentially he goes that extra mile as well. Or maybe he goes a little bit too hard and he has a regression. It's hard, but he has been consistent over the years. The other thing to note with Dylan Brown is he can start really quickly. He's not like some of the other positions, and even some of the other 5'8" we're going to go through. He can start real quick. So, and he can go big early. So in 2023, he scored a ton in round 2. And he scored a ton in round 2. And in 2022, he scored 2 tons in the first 4 rounds.
Yeah.
So he's not someone that builds into the season. He can start real quick. So if you don't go with him, you have that chance of potentially a ton or 2 tons if he matches the 2022 season and getting left behind with someone that's popping out 40s and 50s if you're going with some other options we might mention later on. So it's a decision that we're all going to have to make, but it's a lot of our salary cap. He's 780,000 in a position where he doesn't really have the ceiling as, say, the halfbacks do, a Nathan Cleary or a Hines. So like a Nathan Cleary and a Hines, they're popping out. They can pop out 150s, 180s even. He doesn't have that. I think 134, 135 might be his highest score he's pumped out in the last couple of seasons. So do you save money there? Are you saving money there, Scoop? Are you going to go? Are you thinking Dylan Brown is the way to go for your team?
That's the big question. As you said, I've moved him in and out of my team a lot even today. So it's depending on really who we get in the center wing cheapies, to be honest, because I'm either going to go Dylan Brown and go a little bit cheaper there, or I'll have to drop down to maybe somebody like a Jaden Campbell and put some more money in other positions if people don't pop up.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about 2023. In 2023, he played 17 games. Due to reasons, he played 17 games. In those 17 games, he had 4 tons, and he had 9 scores over 80 in 17 matches. So he's a proven gun. He has consistency at his scoring, and he only had 2 games under 50 as well. In 2022, he had just 3 games under 50 out of 24 matches. So you know you're not going to get a low score out of Dylan Brown. I don't know whether you can say that with some of the other names we're going to mention, but it's no different than like Payne Haas as well. You know what you get with Payne Haas up in the front row forward, but do you spend up there as well? Payne Haas copper money. Like it's that tough one where you've got to save somewhere. Payne Haas doesn't have the ceiling, and Dylan Brown doesn't have the ceiling as some of the other absolute guns have. So look, he's been in and out of my team as well so many times. It's one of those positions I definitely tinkered with saving some money in and looking at. So, for example, in fact, would you ever captain Dylan Brown? If you had him in your team this year, would you ever throw the C on him?
It would probably have to be a buy round at best. Like,
absolutely, and that's my point. Even Munster. We'll get to Munster as well. But with Munster, would you ever put the captain on Munster over all the other guns in your team?
Not very often.
No, and that's the point. In that 5'8" position, it's pretty rare that we throw the captain armband on them. So do you save money in that position and go, well, hang on, I can save 100, 200, 400,000 in that position and look elsewhere and bring in some other guns in other positions that you might put a captain on and increase how many people you could put a captaincy on?
100%. Like, yeah, if you're looking for those potential that really fast start for guys that can score you 150, you're looking at potentially being able to upgrade from somebody like Pappenhausen, if you don't think his draw's real good, all the way up to like a Turbo or a Ponga who can absolutely smash up monster scores. And depending on the structure of your team, that might work. So at the moment, I've gone pretty heavy in those positions, and I'm finding it really hard to move the coin around to get a good 5/8 as well. So I think I'm probably going to have to end up sacrificing there, as you said, and probably take my chances on some of the guys that score a little bit lower.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got that question written down here to ask as well, because it's a really valid point what you made, that you just mentioned just then, and that's, what is Brown costing you? If you go Brown, he's going to cost you something in your team. Because if you want to go Hines, Cleary, 2-gun fullbacks, potentially a gun hooker, he's going to cost you something. He's going to cost you value in your he's going to cost you good solid options in your centres. He's going to cost you in your front row potentially. He's going to cost you something in your team. Or do you save there and strengthen some of those other positions that do definitely have the higher ceilings as well, like centre wings, that I've seen so many teams come through to me where I'm seeing guys that are likely, might prove me wrong, but to get 20 to 30 points, like they did last season as well. And eventually, they put in the occasional great game, but most often what you're getting from them is about a 20 to 30 point average. And there's heaps of those players out there in centre wings that are like that. So do you move away from that and go, well, we cheapen down and maybe don't go Dylan Brown and we go someone a little bit less expensive and we turn a Bostock from the Dolphins, or we turn one of the cheap Canberra guys, or we turn Iro from Cronulla into Karaz or into Mazu or into someone else? Like that's a big average gain that you're making, and you're sacrificing in 5'8" and some other positions potentially, but you can make those kind of leaps in points. And it's the mathematics behind it that people need to have a good look at to work out for their team structure what's right for them, and is it that the spot they want to make that saving in. Look, Dylan Brown's a gun option, no doubt, and I'd love to have him in my team. I think you would, we all would, but you can't have them all. It's not Pokemon. You can't have them all.
Yeah, funny you should say that, to be honest, because that's the very trade I did about 5 minutes before recording this podcast. I went, how much money can Dylan Brown improve my centre wing? And I turned one of those guys, and I was nearly able to get up to like a Tungo because I already had Kiraz in my
Great
team.
option.
So it really does strengthen other positions if you think that ceiling is there. So
and you don't have to go down to double cheapy. We're not talking about $200,000-$300,000 guys here necessarily. You can just step down. We're going to go through a few of these options too, where you can step down a couple of levels and potentially still have some value there in some of these guys, but you don't have to drop down to the bottom dollar. But to strengthen up your centre wing, and not just one person, you could also strengthen 2 or maybe even 3 positions. Like, for example, you just mentioned that then. Look, there's a lot of people out there that aren't going to go Pappenhausen based on injury, hasn't played for a while, really goal kick, won't he goal kick, his draw hard at the start, the buy that he has at the start. There's a lot of reasons why people are going, well, I've got someone might have Harry Grant in hooker, and I don't want too many Melbourne guys. So it's like, do we not go Pappenhausen? But is Dylan Brown costing you Latrell? Is he costing you Drinkwater? Is he costing you another gunner, Turbo, who had a great apparently hit out against the Dragons? I mean, what's he costing you in your team? Is he costing you Moses up to Cleary? Is he costing you Bo Firma up to Fafita? I don't know. What's he costing you? He's got to cost you something. So it all comes at a price.
yeah, definitely. I suppose the alternative to that, will just put up Justin P's question. How much then does the value of a trade come in if you're going to put him there and leave him there all year? Because we've got some other positions that you can make a lot of money. There's going to be ups and downs. As you said, his floor is very, very good. His second lowest score of the year was 47. It was barely under 50. So
Incredible.
is there potential that this trade you save outweighs some of that other stuff, or is it you just going to be too far behind on points?
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it? And unfortunately, none of us are going to have the magic answer to that. It's one that all coaches just need to make that gut call on, because there's no magic answer to it. I can't tell, and we can't really sit here and say with certainty this is the decision to make. It's really dependent as well. A big part of this 5'8" conversation is going to be dependent upon the structure of the rest of your team. How you've set up, or how you want to set up the rest of your team as well. You might be really passionate that Cleary and Hines are the only options for you in half, and that's it, and you want a gun front row forward. Well, some of those decisions are going to cost you potentially Brown, and you might decide that you would never do double cheapy hooker. Fair enough, but that's going to cost you something. So depending on the structure of the other positions, would kind of answer that question from Justin, and it's a great question, Justin, because it's valid. It's an extremely valid question. Saving a trade absolutely is worthwhile, especially for someone like this who doesn't have an early round buy like some other players do that we'll mention as well. His buys for Dylan Brown or for Parramatta are around 9, 16 and 20. So you won't have a buy to worry about with Parra until round 9, and then around 16, which is the second major buy round where we're going to got to play 13 players, and then round 20, which is the minor after round 19 major. So look, the buy schedule's not awesome because you would love to have him there for the major or most of the majors and minis if you can do that. But unfortunately, you are going to miss him for one major, one mini buy round. But in saying that, if you can save a trade, it's absolutely worth it. And where you can have that in the back of your head as one of the deciding factors, I think it's worthwhile considering.
Yeah, 100%. All right. Is there much more to discuss on Dylan Brown, or are we going to talk about the next man on the list and whether he can outscore him this year?
Are we talking about one Mr. Cameron Munster?
One Mr. Cameron Munster. We've got a return of potentially the full maximum spine for the Melbourne Storm with Grant and Pappenhausen and Hughes and Munster. The return of some structure and normalcy to this deadly Melbourne team. And we saw how much Pappenhausen just helps Munster out by being there on those breaks, by just being up in the line and being threat and attack that lets Munster do his stuff. We saw Munster was frustrated at times this year and didn't really look his best because he wasn't able to use that space that Pappenhausen can just create by
Absolutely.
being there. In 2022, Munster averaged 80. Is he the guy who can hit those? Well, I don't know about consistent 150s. It's not 2021 turbo, but is he the guy that can get you some ceiling plays early in the year?
Okay, well, let's look at ceiling plays for him. He started fast the last 2 seasons, so no different to Dillbags we just spoke about. Both of these guys are fast starters. Munster's even faster. On averages, that is. He's even faster. And I released a video of some of the fastest starters in Supercoach that averaged, I think it was 80 plus over the first 10 rounds, and he was one of them. So he's a fast starter as well. So you're getting a really good option there to kick off your season if you're trying to get that fast start. But his draw isn't great, and he has got the early buy, which also hurts him as an option. But he started fast the last 2 seasons. In 2023, started off the 65, 78, 74, and 114 for an 83 average. So it's a brilliant start. After round, and that's up to round 6. In 2022, he had high scores of 121, 84, 96, 110, 130, all in the first 9 rounds. The guy's a gun. He starts the season. He doesn't need to build in, and you're 100% right with Pappenhausen there. The defence being drawn to Pappenhausen and the space, and being able to put him through as well. It's incredible what the difference that could make to Munster's game. They are so much more dangerous when they've got Pappenhausen lurking around as well and running and following the ball. So you can't just commit to Munster when you've got Pappenhausen that close to the ball like he loves to do. So if Pappenhausen is at 95% of his best, maybe even higher, God, it brings Munster right into the equation. Would I go there? No. No, not this season. Not to start off with. Do I want him eventually? Maybe. Him or Dillbags, you can definitely see them as being one of your ending 5/8s or potentially a combo. But tough first 5 rounds of the draw. They've got Penrith, New Zealand, Newcastle, a bye, and then Brisbane. That's a shocking start to the season, really. Munster is special, though, so he can score against anyone. But in saying that, I'd rather him playing Dragons, you know, they're my team. Dragons, Bulldogs, Tigers. I'd rather him facing these guys, and not having an early round bye. And the other thing to consider, and I mentioned this a lot in the things that I put out there on social media, and that is don't forget about the buys, the early round buys, because they are important. If you've, I hear some popular people out there talking about, don't worry about people that are on buys. It's only 1 round. It's only 1 player. Well, it's not 1 round, and it's not 1 player. These single buy rounds that we have, if you've got Harry Grant and you're looking at Pappenhausen and you're possibly looking at Munster, then you're talking about 3 guys or 2 guys. That's well, if we're going off his averages, it's 150, 160 points potentially you're going without that round, and you're bringing in someone in 5/8, maybe like a Weeks or someone who's going to get to 30 points. I'm sorry, but it's not just 1 round. Every single round, if you've got guys on buys or multiple guys on buys and other teams don't, they will literally jump you by hundreds and hundreds of points. It's really important to have that in the back of your mind when making these decisions. Yes, you can't have all the guns, but the guns you do bring in, just have a think about when their early buys are, and have you got too many of them from one team in those early rounds? It's important.
I 100% agree. And as you're saying about Dylan Brown, what does it cost you and your team? It costs a lot of money, less than Dylan Brown, but still a lot. But also with that early buy, is it costing you another Melbourne team in your player that's really important, like a Bloor if he's starting? Is it going to cost you a Harry Grant because you just cannot afford to have that many Melbourne players out? And I would argue, to be honest, that the first couple of rounds are the absolute worst for buys because, as you said, you've got to bring in somebody who's a lot cheaper. And the reason why it's so bad is because that is the time of year where they are the biggest difference in salary cap and likely scoring. If you're round, even like say round 8, Rabbitohs, I think have got round 7 or something like that. If you're missing a Murray and a Latrell in round 7, that's 2 pretty good scorers. That's 2 very
Absolutely.
significant parts of your salary cap that's going to be missing out. But by that time, there's a very good chance you've moved on from a couple of players, upgraded to some strong guys in that position, and the replacement coming in instead of scoring 30 like a Weeks, might be scoring 50, 60. And then the effect is a little bit reduced. It's not going to be completely gone because, I mean, that's the main guy in that position
Absolutely.
potentially. But I do think this very early buy from the Storm is going to catch a lot more people out than they suspect. So I think personally, that's the thing that's stopping me, even more than the draw itself.
Yeah, 100%. And you mentioned we mentioned a great point before. What is Brown costing you? I really think what Brown will cost a lot of coaches if they want to have a gun hooker and, let's say, Cleary and Hines. I think what Brown will cost a lot of coaches is they'll get Pappenhausen, because that's a way to save 100, 200 grand or whatever it may be, depending on where they want to go. I think they'll get Pappenhausen because that's where they also can save some money. That's what Brown might cost them. Whilst Pappenhausen could be amazing, and I love Pappenhausen, don't get me wrong, he's a freak, and when he's fully fit and firing, and I love Pappenhausen. I'd have him in my team in a heartbeat if I could see him, and I possibly still will in after trials if I see that he can take off the Pappenhausen from old. But what if he's not? What if you've got to get Pappenhausen and he's not 100%, but that's all you can afford because you want to go Dillbags or Munster or whatever it might be? They're going to cost you something. And then you're going to put another Melbourne player into your team with an early buy, tough draw, and you've got 2 or 3 like Ball, like you mentioned. It could cost you a lot of points. Whilst you might save some money, you might be getting someone and saving some money going Pappenhausen from Latrell or Drinky or whoever it may be. It's going to cost you points because you're going to have to play Weeks or whoever it is that is your backup 5'8" there. And you know, it's a costly exercise bringing in Dillbags or Munster, potentially. Depends on how you structured your team, though. You might have done some other moves, which definitely I've seen some teams do it, and I've been looking at some other moves too. So there are some things that you can do.
Yep, 100%.
But no, Munster's a no-go.
Yeah, there's just one or two too many things against him for me. The potential is there. We see one big part of upside, which is Pappenhausen's back, but then you've got 2 negatives against him, and that's probably too much to sway and sways me away from him, considering the other factors even outside of those 2.
So they have a buy around 4, 13 and 19 Melbourne. So, look, if you really were sold on Munster and you wanted him, I know it's going to cost you a trade, or maybe you work up to it. Maybe you can find someone with some value that you can only have to go up 150 grand, 100 grand to from someone else upwards after round 4, after they have their buy, and look at him as a pickup in round 5 potentially. So maybe wait till the tougher draw is over with and their buy is over with, and then maybe pick him up and maybe just get someone that's hopefully makes you a bit of money on round 3, round 4, maybe round 5, and then pick him up in round 6. Like, there's ways to getting there. You don't have to start with all these guys. You can build your team and your value and jump to these guys when the draw becomes more favourable and when their buys are over. One of their buys, most of these teams have one early buy at some point before the Origin. So jumping on them after that early one can be a move that could work for you. And that's not just Munster. That goes for Grant. It goes for Pappenhausen. It goes for a lot of these Melbourne guys. Maybe you just hold off and have a plan on how you're going to get to them after round 5.
Yeah, it's a very good point. I am very strongly looking at somehow getting Pappenhausen in if he does sit at around that 600k mark through that period, and through some game fitness starts to go wild. It's going to, if you double gun up at fullback, it'll be a little bit more annoying to do, but it's still something that's definitely hard to miss. I mean, we saw with someone like Gutho going from a solid price to insane, Drinkwater going from solid price to insane. It's still worth it if they are going to kill it like that. So I'm not adverse to starting with, say, even like a Ponga and a Turbo, and then if they're going along okay and Pappenhausen's starting to match them at 300k cheaper, well,
Fantastic.
you've pretty much just made your money.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree anymore. Like, that's spot on. I think last season, and I'm just bringing up something now. Last season it was Turbo. So Turbo last season started off at 577,000. So that was the Pappenhausen of this season, if that makes sense. So that was that guy who was undervalued. We know he's a gun. We know he can go off. But it made a bit more sense last season with Turbo as far as draws and buys and things are concerned. But I would argue this season with Pappenhausen that potentially that needs to wait. But is Brown or Munster costing you of a different fullback that makes you have to fall into a second or a third Melbourne player. I don't know. It's something that people need to think about. Have a look at your structure, have a look at the buys, have a look at the draws, have a look at everything. You need to weigh it all up if you want to get a well-balanced team come round one that has as little fires as possible to put out. And that's the key here, is you don't want to get to round 5 and go, oh no, I've got Bloor, I've got Munster, I've got Pappenhausen, I've got Grant. Hopefully no one's going to have that full setup. But if you did, you've got a lot of fires in round 5 that you need to, with 3 trades maximum, that you're going to have to try and put out. So look, it's one of those things that I don't want headaches in my team. I want to be able to have as little fires as I can so you can make strategic trades at the start, not putting out fires if possible. And when you have unlimited trades right now in preseason, this is the time to make those kind of decisions.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Those saving up money in certain positions or just being able to access other players when you need them to, as you mentioned, I can't remember. It might have been even the Hooker podcast. Just having money in other positions is important if you're going to be able to do things. Those are strategy trades that you can use very efficiently to even help put out fires. I mean, that 300k you save from going a turbo to a Pappenhausen can help you put out something really bad elsewhere in your team pretty easily.
Yeah, you're spot on. 100%. That's exactly right. You've got to, not you don't have to, but I would recommend that you definitely have some players of value spread out through your team. It's important. So, and even I know centre wing, most people there aren't going a 700 plus thousand player. That's fine, I get it, because it's hard, again, to have them all. You can't have 700,000 players all through your team at the moment. So I understand that, but at the same time, it helps put out some fires. And I've heard a lot of people saying, well, you can't do the double cheapy hooker move because then you're never going to be able to afford to go from Hands to Grant if that's what you wanted. Well, if you've got an $800,000 or $700,000 centre wing sitting there and he doesn't fire the way that you want him to at the start, but someone who's $400,000 goes nuts, you absolutely could downgrade that $750,000 centre wing to the centre wing that's $400,000 that has a huge negative break even and use that money to upgrade Hands, Barrett, Brayley, whoever up to Grant in two trades. In two trades to pick up whatever hooker is looking the goods, maybe after their buy, Grant, JMK, whatever it might be. You pick up the gun, and then you also pick up the gun centre that's about to have a huge negative break even, and that move is made to 2 really good guys rather than trying to guess it correctly at the start. I'm not saying to do that move, double chip your hooker. I'm not saying that. I am just saying having value in your team though allows you moves, and that's maybe Fafita goes nuts. Maybe you want Fafita after his early round buy, and you just need to have that cash there to be able to make that move quickly because these guys can not just hit 1 ton, they can hit multiples, including Munster, including Dill Bags that we spoke about. These two, and we're spending a bit of time on these two, but there's a reason for that, guys who are listening to this. It's because they're guns. They are the premiums. And you definitely need to consider it, and you need to weigh it up because if you're weighing up Munster, you need to know what that comes with. Oh, Dylan Brown, what that is costing you. You need to just have that thought in your head. And is there another way we can make up those points if you go cheaper? If you lose a 20 or a 30 average by going down to someone else, not favourable to do that. Obviously, you don't want to be losing 20 or 30 points on average. But can you get a 30 or 40 point gain somewhere else with that money that you save? Is there value somewhere else where you can make up more points than what you're losing with Dylan Brown? That's what we need to consider when we're building our team pre-season.
I definitely agree with that. And as you said, we spend a bit of time on these two because they are probably the top. They're the ones that we probably want to have as our main 2 guys at the end of the season, if possible in an ideal world. However, we'll move over to the 3rd guy up in that top bracket now. What is Cody Walker going to do on that monumental Rabbitohs left edge? Is he going to get left out? Is Whiten going to do stuff? Or is he just going to go bananas?
Yeah, that's a hard one, isn't it? Like, look, I'll start off with laying it out there. I have no interest in Cody Walker to start the season. I have 0 interest. In fact, I have negative 100 interest in Cody Walker to start off this season. Sorry to all those people who are going Cody Walker. I guarantee you one thing, Coach Krupp's team will not feature Cody Walker at 5'8". Anyway, not to start the season anyway. And I'll explain a few reasons for that. But it is a new look for Cody Walker, having Whiten there as well, and potentially if the rumours are to be believed as well about Matangi moving potentially to the left side as well, second row. It's a new left side there potentially. So what Cody can do is unknown with that. But Cody's a freak player who plays eyes up footy, and he creates a lot. And he creates a lot for all the guys outside of him, as well as for himself, but he creates a lot for them. So he's a really attacking, creative player, as we all know. And at some point of the season, we're all going to be talking, or we likely are all going to be talking about Cody Walker, and we need to get him in our teams, or he's the best option. The question is he the best option now, or is he going to be the best option later? I would argue he's the best option later. 705,000 for Cody Walker, based on the 69 average, is a lot of coin for someone when you could spend not much more and go up to a Munster or a Dylan Brown. I know where my money would be going. He started fast though the last 2 seasons, 2023, 65, 78, 74. No, sorry, I'm talking about Munster, my fault. Wrong notes. He's got the tough draw, sorry. Cody Walker has the tough draw. He goes to Vegas, start off with. Now, we don't know the Vegas effect, if there will be an effect, if it might have a positive effect. We don't know. But I know that I'm a World Series of Poker player myself. I've been to Vegas many, many times. I know what Vegas is like. And I know what Vegas would be like as a young, not that I'm not these things, Scoop, but I know what it would be like if you were young, good-looking, filthy rich, spare time. I know what Vegas can do. So it is a risk to pick a fair few Vegas players, because there's every chance that some shenanigans might go on over there. Hopefully it doesn't, but you never know. They start in Vegas with Manly, and then they have Brisbane, Roosters, Bulldogs, and New Zealand. And I won't stop there, mention the first 5, because after that, that's hard enough. Going to Vegas to play Manly, then coming back for Brisbane, Roosters. Bulldogs is the easier one, obviously, and then New Zealand, who Supercoach-wise are very good defensively for leaking points. But then after that, they then have Cronulla and Melbourne, and then Penrith. So it's possibly the worst, toughest draw you can get. Like, it's a hard draw for Souths. And that's why people are looking at Cody Walker and some other South players too. You just need to be thinking a little bit. But we're basing this off, or I'm basing this off last year and how hard they were as an NRL team, as well as how hard they were in Supercoach for leaking Supercoach points. This year could be completely different with some of these teams, so we don't know. But we can only go off what we do know. So we're going off what they were last season. And that is a really tough draw to open up with. And another thing for head-to-head players with Souths, so this goes, it's a long way away, obviously, but for head-to-head players, in the grand final, they'll have Penrith as well. So it's going to be one of those things for head-to-head players. You may not want to have too many South players come at the end of the season, because they're going to have one of the hardest opponents to play for Supercoach. They have buys around 7, 13, and 17. So again, they've got to buy. Round 7's not too early. You hopefully could make a few moves, upgrades by round 7, hopefully. Round 13 is a major buy. Round 17 is a minor buy. I'm not overly interested in South players too much, even though there's a fair few of them I have been looking at. I'm not overly interested in too many of them at all. The draw is really difficult. He likes to score points on easier teams, I find, like easier opponents where Souths can run through them, or not really run through them, run around them to the left. That's kind of what Souths like to do. That draw, I don't see that happening with those teams. So he also starts slower than all the other guys that we've mentioned. I can go through stats and that, but he's a lot slower.
I was just looking at that. He lost about 200 grand to start last year, and he's lost a bit to begin the year before. So I can definitely agree that he's somebody you want to look at later.
After the first 3 rounds last year, after 3 rounds, he lost 60 grand in his first price rise or drop. He lost 60. The year before that, he lost 270,000 after the opening 7 rounds. Wow. He's not someone that starts fast, typically speaking, in the last couple of years. He's lost money for those that have started with him. And when at the start of the season we're trying to build value and points, and someone that looks like they're going to have a hard draw, going to Vegas, I'll just rattle off the draw. It's not just for the first 5, but the first 8 rounds, it's pretty tough. I don't think Cody is an option. Yeah, but keep that in mind for other South players too that you might be looking at in other positions.
Yeah, well, it certainly makes guys like Latrell someone to think about, because although they are guns and they will average up the top around that mark near the end of the season, will it take a while to get there? So I definitely agree with that. That's a really interesting one to make note of as you plan your team out. All right. The next part, we got an 11-point jump, so we can definitely tell who the guns are. Is there anybody in that sort of bracket just below that might have the potential to jump up? Is there anyone like a Dearden being named captain if the Cowboys have a bounce back year? Matt Burton if the Bulldogs finally have a bit of resurgence? Is there anybody? What are you looking for from those type of players in order to be even considering them?
Look, to be honest, what I look for when it comes to choosing a player that might make that next level jump, you want an increased role in the team, increased minutes. This is just talking super coach we're talking about here, not in real football. We're talking about increased minutes, increased role. We're talking about change of positions to a more favourable position. We're talking about really good buy schedule or really good draw to start off with. These are all the favourable things that we're looking at to go, is there going to be a jump? We've got someone going from a 40-minute role now to an 80-minute role, or 60-minute role stepping up to an 80, or they've moved from the right side to the left side now. So that's more favourable to this attacking team, and that's going to be, we'll see a jump. Bo Firmo is a good example for that as well. Bo Firmo is someone that a lot of us are saying, he goes left side, we're interested. He goes right side, I'm not as interested. So these kind of things make people more favourable than others. Looking at that list you rattled off, for me, look, I'm not overly interested in Nicarima. I've done some research on Dearden that didn't come up favourable for me either. I don't see much value in Dearden, to be honest. I know he's a name that I've seen a few coaches out there looking at Dearden. In 80-minute game, he averaged just over 50, but that's with 14 tries, and 2 of those games he scored doubles. He didn't even go over 100 in any of those matches. So he's not really someone that's going to set your world on fire. Can he repeat or better 14 tries? I don't know. I could take a guess at that, but I don't know. But you're banking on someone to have a pretty good season that already came off scoring a lot of tries, and even when he scored doubles, couldn't put 100 together in Supercoach. So not for me. Has lower scores in him, had 4 games under 30 from 22 games played, so 20% of his games were low. Dearden's a no from me. I don't see the appeal in Dearden, besides just doing it to save cash, but not really thinking it through as far as upside is concerned and value. And start of the season, that's what we're looking at. And don't get me wrong, he might go nuts. And if he goes nuts, fantastic. I'll be happy about that because I'll downgrade someone or I'll change someone and I'll bring him in. But to start with him, not for me, not for Dearden.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, you'd have to have the Cows to go absolutely monumental for him to be worth enough value to get him. And there's a lot of guys in that bracket who performed well last year, and instead of jumping up, they might drop back. Somebody like a Nicarima killed it because he had a lot of fullback games and a few games starting 5/8 where he did really well. This year, I don't know if I expect anything like that. Although the Dolphins draw is good, based on the rules that you gave, the only guy in that sort of area that does have a new role, new club, whatever, he's going to have to come up eventually. So we'll talk about him for now. And that is Luke Brooks. Is there any interest in better team, better player, or is he going to get strangled next to DC and not do any work?
Oh, let me just see if I can find my notes on Brooksy. All right. I did have a look at Brooks today, actually, knowing that we're having this conversation. So I wanted to have a bit deeper dive into Brooks and see whether or not there was any interest there from my side. 560,000 based off a 55 average is Luke Brooks. Dual, which is handy, obviously. That can come in useful throughout the season if you're planning on holding him throughout the season. New club, he's going to have potential for more attacking stats because he's got some really good players around him, and obviously you've got Turbo there lurking everywhere. So and DCE. So you've got the potential there for more of an attacking, or not potential, you definitely have a more attacking team. So whether Brooks can link up and be part of that, untested at the moment, but hopefully trials give us maybe some answers, although based on some information we've heard, we might not get the full Manly side in some of these trials based on what is being put out there. So that's a wait and see as well. What kind of effect that Turbo might have with Brooks, for example. But with Brooks, to me, he's a bit more of a gut feel pick. You don't have enough information. You don't have information. There's so many new elements to Brooks that I'm like, you're picking him based on what you think might happen. You've got no real place to base that on. So for me, it's a watch and see, not a get at the start of the season. It's too much risk, not enough upside as far as I'm concerned. he averaged 55 and he's priced at 55. So that's, and yes, you're only banking on that there should be upside because he's now playing for Manly. Well, I don't see the value really, and I'm not going to rely on a gut feel that's going to happen. I feel he's inconsistent with his scoring, and he has been. I feel like the next season, if I was to use my gut feel, I think he's going to have some really high scores. I'm not sure. Let me rephrase that. I think he's going to have some scores well above his average, and I think some people might even put a couple of them together, and then people might jump and go, "Oh, we've got to get Brooks," and they might jump on him. But I think the week after that, he's probably going to pump you out a 20 or a 30. So
Yeah.
I just feel like he's going to be very inconsistent with his scoring. When you've got someone like we mentioned, like Dylan Brown, Munster, who are super consistent with their scoring at a high level, I would look elsewhere. I would look to try and work your money in a different way than Luke Brooks to start off with. Wait and see. It's too much of a gut feel, not enough information to base it on. I don't think you're going to get all the answers in the trials, to be honest. I think it's a wait and see.
Yep, I think so too. There's just him not being the main half is going to affect his floor way too much for me to be confident, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
Burton as well. You mentioned Burton's name. I'm not interested in Burton either. At this point in time, what effect does Crichton have on him? Does Crichton goal kick, meaning like this, or does Burton keep the kicking?
Big one.
You might pick up that answer possibly in trials. Hopefully we'll pick up that answer then, but maybe you do, maybe you don't. Not many middles at Canterbury, we know that, so there's going to be a lack of go forward, like always. To me, Burton, I can see him maybe having a potential regression, not any upside or value in him. So to me, I would steer clear of Burton as well.
Yeah, I agree. There's not too many in this sort of area until we get to a certain Titans player. But the one person we probably need to address, given he's at 19% ownership, are people just reading way too much into Ezra Man's grand final performance?
Oh, that's so funny you say that. The first thing on my notes is the exact same comment. What a grand final. We all know that, right? And it's burned into our memories. What a freakish game that he had. But you've just got to put that to the side. It's not what he does every single week. It was amazing, but you can't. You've got to do your best to clear that out of your memory bank now. It's not what you're going to get week in, week out grind of the NRL. So
yeah,
we've got enough data on Ezra Mann to be able to make some educated decisions there. Like it's not like Luke Brooks of sorts playing for a brand new team and we don't have any data on that. And so I feel like with Ezra Mann, we can just kind of look into it a little bit. Let me just get my notes on Ezra.
Yeah, the thing that pops up the most we look at last year's for me is he averaged 55, and apart from that 100 score he's had in round 12, his next highest was 72. That's not even 20 points above his average. I just don't see consistent big games that are going to make you money.
Yeah, I agree. I'm on your page there as well. I completely understand what you're saying. I don't see the value there either in Ezra. Like, again, you're kind of hoping and wishing that he'll be someone that he potentially hasn't shown as yet consistently. So I think like your first point, people are thinking a little bit too much about the grand final and the one or two occasional cracking games that he has. You just got to. You're looking at the moment for value to build your team off, so you can get to these next level guns. You want to get to the Munsters and the Dillbags and all this stuff. You want to get to the Payne Hasses. You want to get to all these premium centre wings. But to do that, you're going to need to build value and build money in your team. In 80-minute games, he averaged just over 50. So in 80-minute games, you average just over 50. Oh, sorry, I'm reading the wrong notes, am I? No, sorry, I'm reading the wrong notes on that. No, Ezra Mann, to me, he's someone that I would watch to see, but I don't really expect anything different from Ezra, and I don't think there's value there to pick him up to start with.
Yeah, I mean, Broncos already came second and were one of the best attacks in the comp. How much higher would they need to go for Ezra to do that? I just don't really think there's in it for me.
No, agree.
All right. Now, probably the one that everybody's here for, everybody's wanting us to talk about. Mr. Fullback at the Titans, Jaden Campbell, 5'8" / fullback dual position. He's pretty highly owned for a reason, and that reason is he's looking like he's finally going to lock up that position full time, not going to have those inconsistent bench games and then sometimes starting. Early draw is fantastic. Only worry I've seen really is that he hasn't had that many ceiling games. What is your read on Jaden Campbell's outlook for this year?
Yeah, he piques my interest. He piques my interest. Anytime, so going back to those kind of semi-rules I mentioned before around what makes someone more appealing than others, he fits into that category, right? Like increase minutes, increase. So he's now got the potential to own that position at fullback as well. So we've got a few of those boxes ticked as far as piquing our interest, worthy of looking into a bit deeper. So 450,000 based on a 45 average. First 5 rounds, he'll have St George in round 1, which is a cracking matchup, potentially. And this is the stumbling block for a lot of these Titans players, bye in round 2, followed then by Bulldogs, Dolphins, and North Queensland. So Titans have a great start to the season, as we all know. We're all spoken about me here. So it makes him even more appealing. He does have the bye in round 2, followed by round 13 and 17. So major bye and minor bye again, which a lot of these guys we've spoken about have that kind of setup. Bye in round 2 isn't ideal, obviously, but besides that bye, the draw is one of the best, if not the best. There's a couple of the teams like Dolphins that have a cracking draw as well, but also with an early bye. But they have one of the best. Dual fullback is kind of handy, probably not as handy as some other positions, because I can't ever see myself switching him to fullback. But you never know in the season of Supercoach what happens. With Callum Ponga, we switched a lot last season, or I know I did. I switched him around a lot from halves to fullback with Callum Ponga. So we may have a need for that some point in the season if you start with Campbell, but it's always handy having duals if we can put them into your team. So in his 80-minute games at fullback, I went through his numbers. He averaged around 60. 60 points is what he averaged at fullback, which based on a 45 average for this season, or price at a 45 average, it potentially puts up about 15 points of value. So around 130, 140k-ish of value if he can perform back at that level, what he has already proven to have done. So it's about 60 average over 80-minute games at fullback role. So that's kind of what we might be able to expect from him. Obviously, we could go better. He could go worse. He's going to potentially be doing a pre-season there in that position with the squad, Brimson moving out wide. So he's potentially going to have more confidence because he'll own that position, not just be placed as a gut filler because someone's injured or we're going to try something new this week. He's now potentially got the own the position and get the confidence that comes with that. So potentially even extends that 60 average up even slightly higher and provides more value than 15 points. So do I like Campbell? Yeah, I love Campbell. I really think he's an option. Do you have him as number 1? That's one of the questions I've been asked so many times. Or is he only a number 2? This is where bye round number 2 kicks in. So because he's got that bye in the second round, it becomes awkward. Really awkward. And it's such a shame for Fafita and Campbell that they got this early bye because it makes it really tough, right? To have, well, in Fafita's case, that much money sitting on the sidelines. In Campbell's case, it's only, 450k, so not half of what Fafita is. But if you have him as your number 1, 5'8", the danger obviously is who's your backup? Who's your number 2, 5'8"? If he's number 1, it's someone lower than 450. My best educated guess here for most teams that I've seen is probably going to be Weeks. It looks like is the most popular backup in that spot. We'll get to Weeks hopefully in a little bit and go through some of his numbers and what we think about Weeks. But God, in round 2, that's who you're playing. You better hope that he does have a good matchup in round 2 Weeks. So potentially comes out and scores okay that round because of who they're playing, Canberra. But if that is who you're using, but it's a gamble. It's a gamble that he doesn't pump out a 30, and meanwhile someone with Dylan Brown pumps out 110. And absolutely smashes you head to head, or it takes a big jump up the ladder overall as well, and that you're trying to climb back with Jaden Campbell as your 5'8". So it's a tough one. If you are going to go Jaden Campbell as your number 1, you need to be so careful, I believe, about how you spend that money that you saved on Jaden Campbell and your cheaper second 5'8". You need to use that money super effectively to make sure that you have really thought about increasing the balance of your team, the output of those players that you're bringing in or upgrading as well. So if I can indulge for 1 minute, with your Supercoach team, with everyone's Supercoach team, for those that are listening, obviously we have our 13 players on the field and we have our 4 reserves. But when you have 1 or 2 players on a bye, it's no longer those 4 reserves. You're now looking at reserve number 5 and reserve number 6 that you're talking about. So that's why, again, these early buys are really crucial because you're relying on two players potentially you just didn't want to bring in at all. And there can generally be people that are around that 15 to 30 point mark, which is going to be really hurtful to your team. So you've really got to consider that when you're bringing in someone that has an early buy and you've got a pretty terrible backup option. It can really make a big impact to your squad. So you don't need to look at your 17, but you need to look at player 18 and 19. Who's going to be player 18 and 19 too to cover these multiple teams that have these early buys for you? So you need to make sure you've got a little bit of. I wouldn't spend too much money on player 18 and 19, but you need to be aware of it, that you've got coverage there for who you're going to pick as a reserve when all these players, a Munster, Pappenhausen, a Jaden Campbell, whoever are on a bye. Who's going to be playing number 18 and 19 stepping up to the mark, and what's the likely outcome of that look like? So no, he's a great option, Jaden Campbell.
Yeah, and that's one of those hidden factors that you don't think about as much as the others. You think about, I've got Lussick instead of Harry Grant. That could be 20, 30 points difference. I've got Jaden Campbell instead of Dylan Brown. That could be 20, 30 points difference. But I've made it up 20, 30 points elsewhere with another gun. If that money has been used to fix your depth a little bit and give you a strong 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th scorer, that could be where your 30 points are made up per week, just purely from having less guys who will score you 15 points. By avoiding those bad scores, it can genuinely be as powerful as having some of this other stuff.
The problem is, though, you've only got a limited salary cap, right? And we're already finding it tough to divide that salary cap over 17 players. So when we're trying to strengthen player 18, 19 or 20 in our squads, potentially because we might have 2, 3 players from a particular team on an early buy before we've built depth in our team, it's pretty hard to get 17 good players selected for our preseason teams, let alone 18 or 19. And my advice to people out there as well is you don't want to be having a $400,000 plus player sitting on your bench that you're not playing in your 17 early doors, early in the season. You don't want to be having that, because if you're not playing that player who's 400,000 plus, you're just there for value, for money growth for your team. You're better off having someone that was potentially a $250,000 player who makes the same amount of money, but with the dollars you saved in buying that player, you could have upgraded people in your 17. So but how do you do that? It's hard to do that when you've got a lot of players on early buys, because you do need to rely on player 18 and 19. It's going to be impossible to avoid everyone that has an early buy, no doubt. But you can limit the damage, and you can be smarter with how you structure your team. I did that last season, and it's one of the reasons, and I mentioned this before the Munster Mash, and I think to yourself last time we did the Hooker podcast. I started pretty fast last season, but it wasn't just the start. It was the midway through the season where my team value grew really quickly and got off to an absolute flyer, top 1,000, top 100, top 20, really quickly. And I believe it was partly because of the structure of the team, the thought that goes into it. Not just choosing who I think is the best player, who's going to get the highest average. We all know Harry Grant's probably going to average highest. We all know Munster and Dilbaz is probably going to be the highest. But that doesn't mean you should choose them. And it definitely doesn't mean you shouldn't discount other players, like a Jaden Campbell or other people. And I'll even say it one more time. Even a double chippy hooker strategy, I'm not saying to do it, but don't discount it, because there are other... You need to look at how that money can be spent throughout your team and what that can do to your total scoring capacity in a balanced squad, and keeping away from as many of these buys as we can with a balanced squad. But we're all going to have some early buys, no doubt. Just needs a bit more thought.
Yeah, I think you're bang on there. There's 3 or 4 things you need to all balance, and you can't go too heavy on one without affecting the others. Getting a good mix while still having flexibility is going to be absolutely key this season.
Absolutely. 100%. Unless we get some, and God forbid, I don't pray it on anyone, but unless we get some, I won't say injuries because I hate saying that, unless we get some shenanigans that go on in the preseason and some players of value that we all want to put in our team aren't playing round 1, then we're not going to have all this cash to splash. We're going to have to dice this salary cap up very carefully if we don't get some key players not being there for round 1. So just there's more to it than just choosing the best player in the position. We typically know who the best players are in most of these positions. It's not about that. You've got to find the value, and you've got to find other ways to save money and still increase averages throughout other positions in your team. And you do need to consider player 14, 15, 16, 17, and even player 18 and 19. You definitely need to have that in your thoughts in some capacity.
Yeah, I agree. We've just got a question. Before we move on to this last little bit, the cheapies, we'll just pop up this question because it's relevant. Bryce has brought up, maybe your 18th, 19th man aren't great ideas to spend 400k on, but how much should you be spending on those guys who you do expect to play every week? I think that you can't, some of these positions you can't avoid having spend up. Like you can't have a double gun fullback without having a reserve on them. You can't have Cleary and Hines without having a reserve on them. I think it's really going to depend on who those other two or maybe three are that aren't your first choice gun in that position.
So yeah, looking at that question, is it okay to spend up big on 4 reserves if you're going to most likely play them over the first month? If you're talking about, if Bryce here is talking about player 14, 15, 16 and 17, absolutely. They're part of your squad. Who player 14, 15, 16 and 17 could be different depending on a few different things, but absolutely, that player 14 to 17 you should be spending money on those players if you can afford to within your team, because they're going to be players that you're going to want to rely on. So when I look at my squad, for example, every year that I play this game, including this preseason, I don't look at who's on the field. I look at my 17, who are going to be my 4 reserves. I need to make sure I've got a strong 17, not a strong 13. And I also keep in mind that I'm going to sometimes need player 18. Hopefully I'll never need player 19 early doors, but I definitely am going to need to rely on player 18 at some point. And player 18, just to answer that question that you asked, player 18, how much would you spend on player 18? Player 18, I wouldn't want him to be $400,000 or $500,000. He wouldn't be anyway, but I wouldn't want him to be that kind of price range. But let's look at maybe someone like potentially a Tallis Duncan kind of price. Someone that's got high, if he starts, has upside, has a lower price point now. He's a great player 18 to have. Or Smithies from Canberra. He might be a great player 18 to have. So, or maybe Kai Pearce-Paul, if he gets to start at Newcastle, he might be a good 18th player to have. So these guys that have a lower price point around that 250, 350 kind of mark, but ideally might have a starting role or soon to have a starting role once they come back from an injury or whatever it might be, or whatever suspension, whatever's holding them out of that team. That's who I'd look at for my 18th player ideally. Someone that I'm confident might better on their day pull me out of 40 to 60 maybe even on their day. But I don't ideally want someone that's likely to pull me out at 20 to 30 if I can help it as player 18. Does that kind of answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. It's going to be just a little bit above that basement guy who, if they don't score a try or they don't get the minutes you want, are going to bomb and just ruin your week, or be an auto emergency nightmare if you have a VC loop available.
Absolutely.
Yeah, let's talk about some of those cheapy 5/8s now, because we've been running a bit. And
Sorry,
we'll
Scoot,
talk
before
about.
we get onto that, can I mention
Yep.
one other person before we do that?
Sure.
I'll just try and be quick with it, and it's only going to mention this person because they're gaining a fair bit of popularity, and that's Trindle. So
Yes,
Trindle comes in at
yes.
comes in at 439,000 from Cronulla. He is training in the preseason as well in that 5/8 role. So, excuse me, he's priced at a 43 average. He's got a really good draw playing for Cronulla, and he gets a full preseason with Hines. He's someone that I know a lot of people are looking at as well. I definitely looked at Trindle pretty strong. In fact, I'll be honest with you, he was actually in part of my plans for my 5/8 position, how I was going to structure it. When I dug into him a little bit further, I've now kind of backtracked, and I kind of mentioned this on my Twitter today, how I've kind of changed my plans a little bit with 5/8. I may not go down that pathway now, Trindle. Yeah, he gets the full season with Hines. However, there's 2 lots of stats with Trindle. Let me just quickly run through these. There's 2 lots of stats for Trindle. There's stats with Hines, there's stats without Hines. So we've got to look at both of those and separate them. Because obviously this season we'll be playing most likely with Hines all season. So with Hines in 2023, he played 6 80-minute games. He scored a 20, a 13, a 73, an 89, 44, and a 48 for an average of 48 points. Without Hines in 80-minute games, I'll give you his totals, and when I give you his totals, I'll also mention straight away after it how many points he scored with goal kicking. So without Hines, in his 80-minute games, he scored a 46 with 12 from goals, a 76 with 20 from goals, a 64 with 6 from goals, and a 32 with 4. So total average of 54.5 when Hines wasn't there, comparative to the 48 when Hines was there. But take those goals out, and he drops to a 44 average. So with when Hines was there, it was 48. Take out the goals because he won't be kicking most likely. It drops to a 44 as well when Hines wasn't there. Pretty comparable, 44, 48. That's kind of in the territory of what we can expect unless there's a significant change in performance, change because he's getting a full preseason. What's going to create more value with Trindle than the 44 to 48 average? He's priced at a 43 average.
Yeah, so, it's not much potential upside unless he has a couple of really big games for some reason, isn't it?
100%. And that's why I've kind of backpedaled a little bit out of that, because initially I was thinking a lot of value, will make money, he'll be a stepping stone up, doesn't have the early buys, ticks a lot of the boxes. I can pair him up then with a Jaden Campbell or someone else. There's a lot of things that you could do there if you didn't want to go down the Dylan Brown or Munster Avenue and bring in Trindle. But looking into it a bit more, I'm now a lot more wary and getting some cold feet on going down the Trindle option. So for those looking at Trindle, if I rattle off those too quickly, rewind this, go back, re-listen to this all again, listen to those stats, but 44 to 48 average, depending on whether Hines was there, Hines wasn't there when you take out goal kicking, because you have to. I can't say to you there's going to be a lot of value in Trindle unless he performs over and above what he has proven to previously.
Yep. I think I agree with that. Somebody who might fit the bill of that 18th man kind of guy who might have to play every now and then, somebody who is starting to get a little bit up in ownership, but we probably can count on the fact that he will be starting, even with the first bye. That's Aiden Caesar. Is there much room for him to do better than his price? I mean, he's probably going to be the dominant half in the Tigers team. Is there just enough? Is there enough ceiling for him to be worth buying?
Want a quick answer?
Why not?
No.
That's what I thought.
I looked at his stats. I looked at it where he came from, the Super League stats as well. I looked at it all. He's 32 years old. He's not a spring chicken anymore. Hasn't played since, I think, in the NRL since 2019, I want to say. So he's got a bye round 1. He's just not an option to start with. I'm sorry, but and we don't even know if he's going to be goal kicking. Most likely, but don't even know. He's definitely a no-go to start with. Watch and see over the first few rounds. Make your choice then.
All right. Next one down, who probably has a little bit more upside, although still not a fantastic team. Kyle Flanagan. We've seen Shane say that he'll want him to take more responsibility with this team. Let Ben Hunt do his thing a bit more without having to carry the weight of the Dragons on his shoulders. Is Kyle Flanagan somebody you might put in your team over one of the Raiders guys who we'll talk about next?
Okay. I did want to talk about Kyle Flanagan because he wasn't on my radar at all. I wasn't even looking at the guy. And to be honest, it's partly because I was looking at Dylan Brown at the point of time with like a Jaden Campbell backup. That was kind of the setup I was looking at, but it was a lot of money. So like I've said several times, you do need to look at all options. You can't just exclude all the different strategies. So you've got to look at them. So I looked into Flanagan for this podcast in particular, and I tell you what, he actually interests me. And I'm a Dragons fan, I can tell you 100%, I wasn't overly happy with the signing of Flanagan, Kyle that is, and I don't really rate him as much of a player, to be fair, either. And it disappoints me when they say less ball for Hunt, more for Flanagan to organise as well and to take more of a role in that team. Anyway, but that's off topic. He's $310,000. He's not a dual. That hurts a little bit, but nothing massive. But he's $310,000. He's only $37,000 dearer than Weeks. He came off the bench last year and had reduced minutes. So therefore, he fits into that category we spoke about before. Someone that's going to potentially have upside if he plays 80. So he has more minutes, possibly. Off the bench last year, reduced minutes. His average last season in 80-minute games was 43.9. So in 80-minute games, he averaged 43.9 and he averaged 38 average in 22. He's priced at a 30 average right now.
Yeah.
So 43.9 in 80-minute games last season and 38 in 2022. Priced at 30 average, we're talking there between 8 to 14 points value in Kyle Flanagan. Now, that's about 90 to 130, 140K we're talking about. He's definitely someone I think people should consider as a number 2, possible number 2 in their teams. If you're going to go that gun cheapy or some other strategy that people are running with, then maybe he, to me, and we'll get on to Weeks probably soon, Flanagan to me is more appealing than Weeks, hands down.
Yep.
Just purely on points, on value, not because I want to play the guy. Ideally, you would never want to play the guy. You don't want to rely on his possible 40 gun points that he might score your team. He's not going to get you any head-to-head wins. He's not going to get you jumping up the overall leaderboard at early doors. But he's not there for that. He's there just to make money off. And I think he makes more money potentially based on stats, and stats only, based on the things that we know. I think he makes more money than potentially what Weeks does. As unpopular opinion as that might be.
Well, to be honest, I can possibly see that moving into the Weeks chat a little bit. If we've got a bit of a Raiders regression, if we've got Fogarty being the more dominant half, and to be honest, some of those starts last year where Weeks was actually in the halves or at fullback were pretty disgusting scoring. So if we see the Dragons do any improvement at all from last year and the Raiders go down, well, he's got the better role, to be honest. If Shane Flanagan's saying that Kyle is going to be a bit more responsible,
yeah,
it just seems like the role, even though it looks similar, is kind of better.
Yeah, I agree. I 100% agree. I dug into Weeks' stats as well. I went through all those. Yeah, he's slightly cheaper. If you're getting $100,000 price difference between Flanagan and Weeks, that changes this conversation a little bit. Because you're not going to want to play Flanagan, you're not going to want to play Weeks. So if you can get the cheaper guy but make similar money, you want the cheaper guy, you don't want the dearer guy, right? So, but we're only talking about $37,000. We're not talking about significant money you're going to save up front. So in 2023, he had 3 80-minute games. Round 6 against Penrith at 5'8", he got 24 points. Round 9, Gold Coast at fullback, he got 29 points. Round 13, Newcastle at fullback, he got 20 points. And he had 1 70-minute game, round 16 against Para at fullback, 49 points. And that 49 points was with a try assist and 2 line break assists. And he's cracked out of 49. So I don't see him hitting those numbers. I just don't see it. I don't see him getting that. In 2022, he had 1 80-minute game, round 25 against the Bulldogs at fullback, and he got 43 points. That was with 5 tackle breaks, 1 offload, and 1 line break assist. So over those 5 games, that's an average of 33 points. He doesn't have the value that I don't see the value that everyone is saying he's your number 2. Not everyone. A lot of people are saying he's the best option for number 2. I see it in Flanagan, as much as that pains me to say, even though, again, I'm a Dragons fan. But just looking at this purely from a Supercoach point of view, I see it with Flanagan. I don't see it necessarily with Weeks. I think he's the one that, unpopular opinion, people might be buying into, a bit of hype from some other social media content creators possibly who are saying it's Weeks is your number 2. And people are seeing teams with Weeks as their number 2 everywhere and just putting him in there without really looking into it themselves. Well, just giving you some stats. I've just let people look into it themselves by doing the work for them. You make your own mind up, but I think Flanagan has potentially more upside based on history.
Yeah. All right. If we're going to talk about one, we might as well talk about the other. Strange does have a little bit more of a price difference. It's closer to about 80K. The mail that we've got so far, though, indicates that if he's going to be in, it'll most likely be at centre, and Chris is going to return in round 2, isn't he?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so imagine the start of the year, putting out a scenario here. We've got people who've got Weeks in their second 5/8 position, and Weeks is sitting at a very high ownership. What is it? It's about 40 or something, isn't it?
Yeah, I've had that up before. Yeah, it's high. It's really high.
Yeah, 37%. And then you have Ethan Strange, who's sitting at centre and disappears after a game and he's at 46%. That is a black hole of value trying to that you've got to try and pry out of your team if it goes wrong. Hey, surely if you're going to try and limit any potential risk, you can only take one of them if both are in the team.
Yeah, look, to me, it's a null and void conversation, really, because, and that's why I didn't make many notes on Strange. Look, if Strange is in the team come Teamless Tuesday, based on some trials too, I'll probably slot him into my centre wing position. Not as one of my 4 starters, but in spot 5, 6, or 7 for my centre wings, and that's where he sits. I'm happy to take the risk there and put him in, and hope that he holds that position. But I tell you now, he doesn't. He never makes my 4 starting centre positions, but I never consider him for 5'8". He's never going in there Strange in my 5'8" position. He'd only go into centre wing.
Yep,
Being
that's a fair point. All right. Is there anyone else that even vaguely comes into conversation? Or I suppose you've potentially got the second Tigers half, but that seems really ick to try and pick somebody who might have value if they might be there. But you've got like Galvin and you've got Fainu, who base price, who might be there. But then what if they're not? That's even worse because they're basement 204. They're not even like 250 that you can switch. You need money to get them out.
Yeah, to be honest, anyone that we haven't spoken about, there's a reason why we haven't spoken about him. And I think what I like about some of these podcasts that we're all doing here for the Supercoach Hub is trying our best to speak about relevant guys as much as we can and less about the guys. We could rattle off every single name in the 5'8" department or in any of these podcasts, but it's good just to kind of keep it to the ones that we honestly believe have some relevance for you guys at home there to actually put into your sides, and spend more time on just on that, rather than just rattling off numbers and stats on anyone that's in that position. So if we haven't mentioned them already by this stage, there's probably a good reason why. And that doesn't mean they might not go well. Congratulations if you choose them when they do, but we're probably not looking at them at this stage.
Yeah, that's a pretty good point. All right.
Is there any questions there we want to quickly run through and give some very short answers
to? There might be a couple, not as many related to 5'8". We've got Metalhead Smurf just talking about his team structure. He's got Moses Hines, Munster, Jaden Campbell combo. That's pretty interesting. The thing that kind of interests me about that is it also doesn't rely on a Moses Dillbags combination, which, I mean, if the Eels fire, that's great. But if they have a couple bad games in there, you've got enough money that you want them to be scoring 150 points combined each week. And if they get thrashed, you could be well down.
Yeah. I echo those comments 100%. I see a lot of people going Moses, particularly around because they don't have the money because someone else in your team has cost you Cleary, or maybe you just don't believe in the Cleary price point and then he can start off with his draw and everything else at that level. So, look, Moses is a popular option. Hines, yep, get that. Munster, Jaden Campbell is a unique combo. I haven't seen that combo, to be honest, many times out there. It's always been, for a premium, it's been the Dylan Brown and Jaden Campbell combo. So I don't hate it. We've already mentioned Munster, great option. And we already know the reasons why potentially I personally wouldn't go Munster, but we don't need to go over that again. Don't hate the combo. I think it's powerful.
Yeah, good. We went over Justin's comment about whether Dillbags is a hold all year. That one's sort of related to more to fullback, but what are your thoughts of having Ponga at 900k form this year? I mean, we'll probably get to that in a couple of podcasts, but I mean, if he gets anything close to that with goal kicking, there's reasons why people are picking him.
I'll ask the question in a different way. Why wouldn't you choose Ponga? What can Ponga do to your team if you don't have him? So if we're playing head-to-head or overall, he has the ability to absolutely destroy your season if you don't have him. There's a lot of players like that. Hines, Cleary, there's stacks of them that have these massive ceilings and this ability to go huge. He's a goal-kicking fullback who is the creator of everything good that happens in that team. So to me, it's a no-brainer. He was literally the first person I went and clicked on. You're coming in my team, and he's never left. Lots of other people have, but never Ponga. Sometimes you've got to choose people. Yes, they cost a lot of money, but those people that can hurt you and hurt your season head to head or overall in particular, you just need to put him into your team. He's one of those people. But the difficulty is there's so many fullback options, and we'll get to that in a future pod, but there are so many great fullback options. But he is, to me, he's a non-negotiable. The rest are negotiable, but he's the non-negotiable.
Yeah, I agree. It's just, we saw what him and Drinkwater did at the end of last year, and he comes at a discount to that. If he can get close to that, he's value.
Yeah.
In his points.
I don't even care if he loses money, because I want him for that one game when he goes and pumps out 150, 160. I want him for that game. And I don't want to not have him and someone else captains him and gets 320 points. Meanwhile, my guy went and had a stinker that weekend and got 50. And so I'm sitting there with 50 while someone else has got 320 points. Sometimes it doesn't matter. You're choosing people for several different reasons. One, you're choosing them for value, potentially, in your starting squad. Other times, you're just choosing them for their points and you're paying for their points. And that's okay. Even if they lose a bit of money, that's okay. It's not the end of the world. If Payne Haas doesn't come out and average what he averaged last season, that's okay. It's okay to drop a little bit of money in these guys. You don't have to jump ship. Ponga might be the same. I don't care if he loses $50,000. I don't care. It doesn't bother me. I've got Ponga on my team, and then I can't get hurt by him, and I need that. Same as Hines. Same thing. If Hines loses some money, I'm not going to lose sleep over it, because I want him in my team for when he pumps out 180 or whatever he might do. And like he did when he came back from injury last season, I didn't have him for that one round because I was going to get him the next season. And he pumped out 180. People had the armband on him, or the vice captain armband on him. They looped and they got 360, 370 points.
Yeah.
And all of us suckers out there that wanted to wait 1 week got smashed.
Yeah, very difficult to make that back. All right. That pretty much does the end of the questions, apart from something that we can use to finish up with. Flatboy's saying, familiar with Scoop a little bit, but this is only second time we've come across Corrupt. How do we find more content from you or more Supercoach creators in general?
Yeah, no worries. Thank you, Plowboy. I have my own Twitter page, so Supercoach Corrupt. Names on the screen has been all for this podcast. So KRUPT, Supercoach Corrupt. You can jump on Twitter and you can see the regular content I put out on there on all range of things regarding Supercoach, but particularly stats and strategy. And I also have my own podcast as well as the SC Hub. I do this podcast. I also run my own podcast as well, Supercoach Corrupt, and that's on YouTube and on Spotify. So I go through strategy, particularly around Supercoach, and not so much going through team lists, names and numbers. It's more about strategy and how to succeed from structuring your teams and what trades to make and things like that.
Yeah, fantastic. And sometimes you need those structured podcasts because a lot of people just do those other things. I think that's a very good niche that you need to fill sometimes. All right. I've been with Supercoach Hub for a little bit, started last year hosting a few podcasts. I'm more of a rookie in the Supercoach circles than I am in others. I've been a fantasy content creator for a little while with Jamie Brown on his NRL Fantasy Analysis channel. You saw Jamie with the last couple podcasts. And so if you want to find me over somewhere else, I'll be over there on that channel or the JBFA Discord. And if you want to find us both, join the Supercoach Hub Discord. You'll see that with the links in the description. You'll be able to find us on Discord and plenty of other really high quality analysts, content creators, and things like that. So yeah, if you're keen to have some high quality discussion, jump in. And Linktree's in our bio. You can find this on Spotify as well as YouTube.
Yep.
And yeah, that's pretty much it. So thanks for joining me tonight, Supercoach Corrupt, and good luck to everybody structuring their teams this preseason. It's starting to get close. It's February. We're starting to see the light.
It's exciting, isn't it? I love it. We're only weeks away from seeing our first matches, and we're all starting to really get serious now about putting our teams together. So it's an exciting time of the year. Just quickly as well, don't forget Thursday nights on the Supercoach Hub. If you want to submit your team, Mr. Charity and some of us guys sometimes jump on there as well with Mr. Charity, and we look at your teams and give you some advice on them as well, and maybe some improvements or some acknowledgement for some great decisions that you've made. So if you want a bit of feedback on your teams, don't forget about that on Thursday night on the Supercoach Hub.
Yep. And on Wednesday, the next podcast, which will deal with your centre wing, will be look like Supercoach Guns, Myth, and Tubes from the Pod. So watch out for that one, guys. And thank you for watching.
Thanks, guys. Great to chat to all you guys again about 5/8.
All right, guys. Have a good one.